Before Troy, before Babylon, before even the pharaohs raised their pyramids, there was Kurukshetra, a battlefield soaked in divine wrath, where gods walked beside men and destiny clashed with Dharma. This is not just a tale, it is the tale, the Mahabharata, a war of kings, brothers, monsters, sages, and gods. But this war did not begin with steel. It began with a curse. Long before the armies marched, before Krishna whispered to Arjuna on the field of war, the seeds of doom were sown in the hearts of kings and queens. In Hastinapura, throne of the Kuru dynasty, power passed through twisted paths, from the blind king Dhritarashtra, born of Vyasa through a widowed queen, to Pandu, his pale, cursed brother, who could not touch his wife without summoning death. But it was not kingship that cursed them, it was desire. Kunti, Pandu's queen, held a secret, a boon, a divine mantra to summon gods. And from the heavens, she bore sons, Yudhishthira from Dharma, Bhima from the wind, Arjuna from Indra, and two others, Nakula and Sahadeva from the Ashvins. But she also bore another before all others, Karna, son of Surya, god of the sun. Cast away at birth, raised by charioteers, a hero doomed to stand on the other side. The Pandavas, born of gods. The Kauravas, 100 sons of Dhritarashtra, born from a ball of flesh, nurtured in jars by black magic. Their leader, Duryodhana, a prince driven not by greed, but by rage, fear, and pride. And thus the house of Bharata was split. One side the 5, the other the 100. 2 branches, 1 throne, and behind them all, the gods watched. Vyasa, the seer who had sired kings, saw what was to come. He saw rivers of blood. He saw Dharma trembling, and he knew the war was inevitable. Not because men wanted it, but because the universe demanded it. For when Dharma falls, the gods make war. The war of Kurukshetra was not born in fire. It was born at a table, where every dice danced and kings forgot honor. This was the moment the Dharma cracked, when brothers were gambled, when a queen was shamed, and fate, like a sword, was drawn. Duryodhana burned with envy. He could not bear the light of the Pandavas, nor the adoration of the people. And when the 5 brothers built Indraprastha, a city of wonder that rivaled even the heavens, his fury became a storm. He plotted with Shakuni, his uncle from Gandhara, a man as sharp as a serpent's tongue, whose every smile was a lie. If we cannot defeat them with steel, we will crush them with chance, Shakuni whispered. And so the invitation was sent, a game of dice in the halls of Hastinapura. But this was no friendly wager, it was a trap. The Pandavas came, bound by honor, and Yudhishthira, the eldest, righteous, noble, but flawed by attachment, took his seat. Shakuni rolled the dice. Each cast cursed, each throw an illusion. The gods watched in silence. Yudhishthira wagered gold, then jewels, then elephants, then his brothers, then himself, and then Draupadi, the queen of fire, born from the sacred flames, wife to 5 kings. She was dragged by her hair into the royal court. Clad in blood and fury, she stood defiant, her eyes burning brighter than the gods. And when Dushasana reached to disrobe her, to strip her dignity before the elders, she cried out, "O Govinda, O Madhava, O Krishna." And he heard. Her sari became endless, her honor untouchable. But the shame stained every soul in that hall. Bhishma said nothing. Drona said nothing. Vidura wept. Only the walls bore witness as Dharma crumbled. And Draupadi swore an oath. I will not tie my hair until it is wet with Dushasana's blood. The fire had been lit. The dice had fallen. The war was now a promise. Kurukshetra would not be fought for land or power, but for a queen's honor, for Dharma's resurrection, and for the silence of the righteous. 13 years, that was the sentence, not for a crime, but for honor. The Pandavas, cheated and shamed, vanished into the wilderness. But the forest was not their prison. It became their forge. Cast out from Indraprastha, clad in bark and silence, the 5 brothers walked with Draupadi into exile. Each tree they passed whispered of betrayal. Each wind carried the scent of vengeance. And through it all, they endured. Bhima, mighty and furious, swore to crush Duryodhana's thighs with his bare hands. Arjuna, silent as thunder, vowed to master weapons even the gods had forgotten. And Yudhishthira, the broken king, held the fire of restraint. He bore the pain of his choices like a crown of thorns. But it was Arjuna whose oath would shake the heavens. Led by destiny, he climbed the Himalayas to find the god of destruction, Shiva himself. And there, amidst snow and silence, they battled. Shiva, disguised as a hunter, marched Arjuna blow for blow, until at last the bow fell from Arjuna's hand. He bowed not in defeat, but in reverence. And Shiva, pleased, gave him the Pashupatastra, a weapon of cosmic annihilation. The gods descended. Indra summoned him to heaven. There, Arjuna learned the dance of celestial weapons. The Vajra, the Brahmastra, the Divyastras, arrows that could split time and drink stars. But it was not just steel he needed. He saw the eternal war between good and evil, even among the gods. He learned that even Dharma could bleed. Meanwhile, Draupadi wept in the wild. The queen of fire slept on stone. And once, when a demon dared touch her, it was Bhima who answered her scream, tearing apart the Rakshasa with his bare hands. The brothers, once princes, now lived among sages, hunters, and beasts. But in their hearts, a war was waiting. Each vow etched deeper, each wound became scripture. But they knew exile is not the end of kings, it is the beginning of legends. 13 years passed. The forest had hardened them, the heavens had armed them. Now, the Pandavas returned, not with cries for peace, but with silence as sharp as steel. The court of Hastinapura trembled when word came. Yudhishthira and his brothers had returned. Their exile was over. The time of justice had come. And yet, Duryodhana would not yield. Blinded by pride, he refused to return even a needle's width of land. Not even the land pierced by the tip of a needle shall be given to them, his parts. Peace was a phantom, war inevitable. But before swords clashed, the last ember of diplomacy was sent. Krishna, the Dark One, the God, the friend, the diplomat. He entered Hastinapura not as a warrior, but as the final breath of reason. Before the kings, before Dhritarashtra, he stood and said, "Give them peace, or face the wrath of Dharma himself." But Duryodhana laughed. He tried to bind Krishna, to seize a god with mortal chains. And in that moment, Krishna revealed his Vishvarupa, his cosmic form. The court was drowned in light. Time itself paused, and the blind king, Dhritarashtra, saw for the first time, wept. But even gods cannot bend free will. And so, the dice had rolled again. Not on stone this time, but on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Both sides gathered allies. Armies like oceans surged to the call. On one side, the Pandavas, on the other, the Kauravas, with Bhishma, Drona, each a warrior unmatched, each bound by oaths and fates. And Krishna, he would not lift a weapon, but he would drive the chariots of Arjuna. For what comes is not a war of kingdoms, it is the war of the soul. At dawn, the conch shells screamed. Kurukshetra, the field of righteousness, was soaked not in blood yet, but in silence. On one side, Dharma, on the other side, Adharma. But soon, even righteousness would cry out, for war is never just. Armies stood like walls of iron. Elephants roared, chariots rolled, the earth groaned beneath them. And between these titans stood Arjuna, his bow trembling in hand, his eyes filled not with hate, but with sorrow. Before him stood his cousins, his elders, his teachers. How could he raise a weapon against them? And so he lowered his bow. But Krishna, the charioteer, the eternal, he did not speak as a friend. He spoke as the soul of the universe. Why do you waver, Arjuna? You mourn for those whose souls are eternal. Rise, fulfill your Dharma, fight. And thus, the Bhagavad Gita was born, the song of the soul echoing through time. With Krishna's words blazing in his heart, Arjuna rose, and the war began. 10 days of carnage. Bhishma, the grandsire, led the Kauravas. No one could touch him. His arrows rained like fire, but he would not kill the Pandavas, for his heart still beat for truth. Only when Arjuna placed Shikandi, the reborn amber, before him, Bhishma lowered his bow. He welcomed death and fell like a mountain struck by lightning. Then came Drona, teacher of both sides, wielding celestial weapons. He tore through the field, but his son, Ashwatthama, was deceived. A lie whispered, "Your son is dead." Drona's will broke, and Drishtadyumna, son of the fire, cut him down. Day after day legends fell. Karna, the son-born, revealed his lineage too late. His chariot stuck. He begged Arjuna for honor, but Krishna reminded him of Draupadi's tears, and Arjuna loosed the final arrow. The war had no room for mercy. And then, the last night, Ashwatthama, burning with grief, entered the sleeping camp and unleashed a massacre. The sons of the Pandavas were slaughtered. Dharma had drowned. The sun had not yet risen, but the tents of the Pandavas echoed with a silence far darker than night. Their sons slain in sleep. 5 young warriors, born of fire and destiny, now laid cold by a single hand, Ashwatthama. Draupadi did not scream. She did not wail. She touched each forehead gently, as if they might still wake. And then she turned to Arjuna, voice breaking like thunder on glass. "Bring him to me, bound but alive. Let Dharma decide his fate, not our fury." And so, Arjuna begins the chase for Ashwatthama. Cornered, Ashwatthama unleashed the weapon of last resort, the Brahmastra, a fire not meant for men, a curse upon creation itself. Arjuna answered in kind. 2 divine weapons now screamed toward one another, and in their path, the world itself stood trembling. But Krishna intervened. His voice, calm as starlight, cut through the fury. "Withdraw them, lest you burn the unborn, the innocent, and the future itself." But Ashwatthama would not relent. He could not defeat the Pandavas, so he aimed his Brahmastra at the womb of Uttara, the wife of Abhimanyu, at an unborn child, at the last heir. But Krishna blocked it. The child, Parikshit was saved, and Ashwatthama was cursed. You sought to end a lineage. You broke the laws of war and womb. Now you shall walk this earth, not dead, not alive, with your wound forever open, your soul unclaimed by gods or men. And so he wanders still, Ashwatthama, the son of Drona, a relic of war that never truly ended. In time, Yudhishthira was crowned king, not with joy, but with ashes on his soul. Kurukshetra had given them victory, but at what cost? When brothers kill brothers, when God stands silent as blood floods the earth, can there ever be a victor? What remains when gods depart, when kings fall, and blood soaks the soil of Dharma? Not peace, not joy, only ashes and memory. Yudhishthira, the Dharmic king, sat upon the throne. His crown weighed heavy with guilt. He had won the world, but lost his brothers, his sons, his soul. The people rejoiced, but in the chambers of the palace, silence ruled. Even Krishna, the charioteer of fate, knew this was not victory. This was merely the end of an age. He returned to Dwaraka, where his people would one day fall to pride, and the Yadava dynasty would destroy itself in a drunken rage. The gods would weep, and Krishna, the god who walked as man, would depart this world, pierced by a hunter's arrow. Even avatars must fade, the wind seemed to whisper. The Pandavas ruled for decades, but their hearts were never again at peace. When the time came, they renounced the world, leaving behind gold, glory, and grief. They walked northward toward the Himalayas, seeking heaven in human flesh. One by one they fell. Draupadi, Sahadeva, Nakula, Arjuna, Bhima. Each collapsed, their burdens too great. Only Yudhishthira walked on. And then, at the peak of the world, heaven opened. A golden chariot descended, but not for his brothers, not yet, only for the one who bore the truth to the very end. Yudhishthira, the king who never lied, entered heaven alive. And so ended the Mahabharata, not as a tale of war, but as a mirror to the soul of humanity. A war not of swords, but of choice, of Dharma, of destiny. It is not just a story, it is a reminder that righteousness is not in victory, but in struggle. The Mahabharata lives on, in every conflict of the heart, in every war of the soul, for the ancients do not sleep. They live within us all.